Does the bull and ant ceremony normally last 10 minutes, or is that easy mode? 10 minutes is sufficient because the ants run out of poison at some point. you, you've been stung hundreds of times and your hands are doing this and you're like, oh, I feel great. And then 30 minutes to an hour later, it starts traveling through and it's that wow, pain. And every time it goes, wow, oh, I'm on fire. Oh, I'm on fire. Oh, I'm on fire. That's what we do. Charles, why do boomers think Israel's our greatest ally? I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, it's a country like any other country. It's got its own geopolitical interests, does its own stuff. There's a good side, there's a bad side. I've been to Israel, a lot of Israeli friends in the IDF, but by no means is it America. They have their own interests, and sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not the same. Countries don't have allies. They have mutual interests. And when you look at the world this way, it works a lot better. There's certainly a lot of good that Israel does, and it's a startup nation, and there's some bad stuff that they do that's just strange. And what bothers me sometimes, the fundamental lack of accountability. Not every person they kill is an evil terrorist. They make mistakes, just like we make mistakes. In Afghanistan, when the drones blew up all those kids as we were withdrawing, that was a mistake. This ambulance thing was a horrific mistake. And you should be able, in the same breath, to hold people accountable, especially friends accountable, and hold them to a higher standard. I think the issue Israel has is just fatigue. They've been fighting for so very long, and it's intergenerational fighting that people are just getting numb to the conflict the way that it is. And it's a tough situation all around for everybody. And the thing that bothers me is why America has to get involved in these things. It's not our fight. It really isn't. It doesn't geopolitically give us much. And there's certainly things we could discuss that I think could radically improve the situation. I think the Palestinian thing probably could be solved if people were willing to zoom out a little bit and look at decades instead of the now. And the Israelis, they have something called Leviathan. It's a gigantic natural gas field that's off their coast in the Mediterranean. It's several trillion cubic meters of natural gas. What they probably should do is make a deal with all the nations to build a pipeline from Israel to Europe, displacing the Russian pipeline, and Israel could become the largest supplier of natural gas to Europe. And that'll lock in for 100 years worth of sales. And what they could do is take 5-10% of that and basically set it aside into a sovereign wealth fund for the Palestinians. Go to the Egyptians who are building a new city. It's called New Cairo. And they're building it because they don't want another Mubarak situation. Mubarak got overthrown because Cairo is so bad in infrastructure, it's hard for the government to protect itself when there's a mass insurgency. So they're building a parallel city that's outside of Cairo to put all their military and government stuff in, but they don't have enough money to build it. They're bankrupt. So you go make a deal with the Egyptians to go buy something on the Red Sea that's 2-3 times the size of Gaza. You just give that to the Palestinians. You set them up with a sovereign wealth fund with the natural gas, and so they have an incentive to work with the Israelis. And then you go to all these nations that support the Palestinians, like Emirates and Saudi Arabia and so forth, and say, okay, time for you guys to go build a Dubai for the Palestinians. And you go and build it there. And then you give them freedom of movement throughout Israel. So probably, a dual passport type of situation. And then through the Sovereign Wealth Fund, everybody has economic incentives to work with each other. And then all that area in Gaza, just absorb it to Israel. And then if they want it, they can buy it back with their billions and billions of dollars that they have. You alleviate the poverty, you alleviate the space conflict, and you create a situation where people have an area to grow into and thrive in autonomy. The new Palestinian state can have its own army. It can act like a nation state. They actually have diplomatic ability. They can navigate. You've solved a major problem for Egypt, and they look like the heroes in the whole thing. And then you create a strong economic tie because you can tie in the natural gas pipeline from Israel with Saudi Arabia, and they can move oil into Europe as well. So the Israelis absorb into the Arab states, and they're all working together, and it becomes a South versus North situation instead of an Israel versus the rest. Is it perfect? No, but the problem with war is the stronger party wins, as the Native Americans in the United States learned, and all these other people learned. And you can complain about it, but that's how human history has worked for a really, really long period of time. And if there's irreconcilable differences where the Palestinians are basically saying we want the land back, and the Israelis are saying it's our land, Well, whoever has the biggest army is going to win that. So they've litigated it through warfare since the 40s, and a lot of people have died, and the conflict continues, and it's going to continue indefinitely. Or you move people. And then you have to ask, how do you do that in a way that it works for everybody? You get more land in the process. You get a sovereign wealth fund in the process. You solve the poverty issues in the process. You get legal autonomy and diplomatic autonomy, and you get your own army and your own nation state, your own passport that means something in the process. And you have freedom of movement in all the old places. In 1 or 2 generations, it's all resolved. And a lot of those old places, the families will buy their stuff back with all the money. And then they're all living and trading with each other, and they don't have problems. Is it perfect? No. Will the group of people right now be happy about it? Probably not. But the vast majority of the young people will understand it, and they'll accept it. If I was president, that would be the deal that I would put on the table. And if they say, no, we're not going to take the deal, well, then what I would do is just leave completely, pull out all U.S. interest and say, we're just going to stay neutral in the whole thing. And best of luck with it. And just let it work its way out then. You have the Eritreans and the Ethiopians. You have Western China, the Tibet situation. You have all the stuff going on in Eastern Europe. If you're looking for a fight, you can find a fight. If you're looking for ethnic conflict, you can find ethnic conflict. If you're looking for injustices in the world, you can find injustices in the world. And if America's foreign policy is every single injustice in the world, every single conflict in the world, we're going to get involved in, we're going to pick a side, and we're going to be the moral authority. Well, what happens when the side you pick starts doing abhorrent things? Then you just turn a blind eye to it? Or then you have to go and overthrow that side and put another group of people in and another thing. Look at Libya with Muammar Gaddafi. Wasn't exactly the nice guy, but there was stability there. And then he's gone, and it's just years and years and years of chaos. Or Iraq, where Saddam Hussein, he's gone. There's years and years and years of chaos, and Sadr City and sectarian violence, and ISIS comes in, and these types of things. Now everybody wants to go to war with Iran. You replace the Ayatollah. Who are you going to replace him with? Another Shah? What if the democratically elected government elects a fundamentalist regime? That's what happened in Gaza, where they elected Hamas. What do you do with that? Oh, we didn't like the people that are elected, so we're going to go to war with them again? If you're going to pick a fight, you put a solution on the table. And you see if people take it. And if they take it, then you in earnest work towards it. If they say no, you say, well, that was our help. And then you move on. And you move on. You just do other things. And you focus on the small wins. The Dead Sea, every year, it's losing a few feet. It's shrinking. So you talk to an older Israeli, you go out to the Dead Sea, and they'll point out that when they were kids, they would swim in an area that's now all dry. They can solve this problem. They build a pipeline with Jordan. Jordan and Israel, they just can't come to terms on it. They can't get it done. It's super easy to do. You just go to all the Jewish billionaires in Wall Street and Silicon Valley. You say, come on, guys, the Dead Sea, each one of you chip in 100 million. And the U.S. government puts some money in, the Israelis put some money in, the Jordanians put a token amount in, and then they just work on it diplomatically. And then boom, 10 years is a mega infrastructure project, joint project in Jordan and Israel. They work together. The Dead Sea is restored. It's a wonder for both of them. It's tourism for both of them. These are small things, but they're big things, when you work together. That's why the Abraham Accord was such a big deal. I went to Dubai, and I saw Sheikh Mohammed walk across all these flags in Dubai, and one of them was an Israeli flag. Israelis couldn't travel there 10 years ago, and they just walked by that flag. That's massive progress for people to actually talk to each other and trade with each other and build relationships together. So you got to think about the economics of uniting people together. And if it's a land issue and both sides are not willing to budge, you got to pick a winner. It doesn't mean you have to burn the other group of people down. You just have to figure something out. And there's plenty of ways where you can figure something out, which it's not good in the short term, but in the long term, the children love it. It is what it is. And if you're not prepared to entertain that, then what you're basically saying is, well, we're just okay with the conflict, and we're just okay with decades and decades and decades of fighting. You can't have two families in the same home. It just doesn't work. One family is going to kick the other family out. And so you build another house somewhere else to solve that problem. That's my thought process from this. And that's for a very American view and from our own lived history in the United States of America. And we ran into this with like the Black Hills, for example. And technically speaking, the land claims and treaties are very clear. It should be returned to the tribes that were kicked out. But the Supreme Court decided not to do that, but rather remunerate them for the land that was taken. Was it the right decision? Well, can we have 45 countries in North America? The United States decided not to do that. It's the same for Hawaii. I was born in Hawaii. The kingdom of Hawaii was overthrown by pineapple merchants, and they created the Republic of Hawaii, the Dole Plantation, these things. And then they, in a very corrupt way, worked with President Harrelson and sold it to the United States, and they couldn't reverse it. And then, it was terrible for the Native Hawaiians. It was a bad deal. They had their land stolen from them. It's Hawaii. I wouldn't have been born there had that not gone down. No one is alive today that lived through that, but their descendants are. And it's not a question of can we litigate the past? It's a question of what do you do for the future? And how do you right that wrong inside the future? That's what I think about it. And it's such a toxic subject to talk about. It's so much sensitivity, you can't have an adult conversation about it. Because whatever you say, it's like they instantly go back to the wrongs here. And they say, you know nothing of our plight. You know nothing of these things. And, you don't understand. It's like, no, you're not the first diaspora that's been kicked out. And you won't be the last. That's human nature. They fight over stuff. And throughout the totality of all human history, there's been a conqueror that's come and taken something. I was just in the Amazon, and there were 30 million Native Americans that lived in Brazil, in the Amazon, before the conquistadors came. And when they came, the majority of them died of disease. They contact the tribes, and they had no resistance to smallpox and other things, and it came through. It was one of the worst holocausts in history. And then the rest of them, they got gradually absorbed, and their ways of life were destroyed. And the only reason why a lot of the tribes survived in the Amazon, it was just physically too difficult, and there was no economic reason to go into the Amazon. But everybody on the coastlines were completely wiped out. And that's not a story that's unique to Brazil. It's the same in Mexico with the Aztecs. It's the same all throughout North America. It's the legacy of America. It's the legacy of the world. It's how people have done things. And I wish it was different, but that's the human race. And today in 2025, we pretend to be very civil, but then we turn a blind eye to everything. And if you don't believe me, tell me what's made in this microphone, all the components of it. And can you, with a straight face, tell me that every single component in this microphone was ethically sourced and the people behind it knew 100% that all the people that were connected to the manufacturing of this were treated fairly? And you can't honestly answer yes to that. And you're listening to me right now. There's 14,000 people listening live, and you're watching me on a monitor, and you're hearing my voice being transmitted from a microphone, and you see me from my webcam. Did a single one of you, until we started talking about this, think in your head, boy, I wonder if everything was legit and everything was on the up and up from this whole setup, and everybody was treated fairly? Not a single child was involved in the labor, and all of that was done properly. Did it even cross your mind? Did you even think about it? No, you didn't. So we love to take the moral high road, and then we enjoy the conveniences of not doing so. The key is, year by year, you do better, and you do a little less evil. And acceptance is that sometimes entire generations of people have to sacrifice for the future. It's the immigrant story in America. When the Italians came over, my Italian ancestors, and the Norwegians came over, my Norwegian ancestors, many of you are Irish listening, and they came over. They lived horrible existences that were super fucking tough. They'd sleep in small homes, 8, 10 families in a very dense place, being exploited by their bosses. And they say, you know what? My children are going to live well. And a lot of their children and their children's children, they live well. My great-grandfather was one of the poorest people on the planet when he came with a bag full of stuff. His entire life was in a single bag. when he came into New York, Ellis Island. I'm a billionaire. Do you think he could have imagined that? I'd have more money than the Medici? Of course not. But his sacrifices, that chain of transitive sacrifices, led to this. That's what you do. That's how you get ahead. You have to think intergenerational, and you build up wealth over time, and you gradually right wrongs over time. And we as a race, humans, we have to think this way. We have to think about the great project, better governance systems, more sustainable environmental policy, better technology towards growing people, more equitable distribution of resources, expanding the pie in resources. We have infinite land. It's called space. Why are we not spending 2-3% of the global GDP on exploiting that? Space mining, space colonies, these types of things. So everybody has something. You have infinite land if you want it. Why aren't we colonizing the seas and doing that in a responsible and economically sustainable way? That's what the Dutch did. They didn't want war, so they just took a third of their country is reclaimed from the oceans. Why don't we go do that? They could have a mega project where they just expand into the Mediterranean Sea with Israel. Hasn't anybody proposed that? Go reclaim 2-3 times the territory and go build a Palestinian state as an island, or a peninsula, off into the ocean. There you go. There's enough natural gas to pay for it. That's how you get out of these things. You have to have vision and push forward. But a lot of people don't want to do that.